So welcome everyone to CDHI third lightning lunch and the last in our series for this fall. The topic today is digital pets, where we will examine human and animal relationships through digital mediums such as digital exhibits, artificial intelligence, and social media like Instagram. My name is Convo, and I am the Digital Humanities Postdoctoral Fellow with the Jackman Humanities Institute and the Critical Digital Humanities Initiative here at the University of Toronto. I will be facilitating the discussion today, and we are very lucky to be joined by three wonderful scholars. First is Dr. Rachel Korbman. She is a postdoctoral fellow in community data with CDHI at the University of Toronto. Her research is on the history of feminist and queer social movements that has appeared and is forthcoming in GLQ, Feminist Formations, Continuum, Social History, and the Rutledge Companion to Intersectionalities. As well as her scholarly research, Rachel is a public historian. Today, she will be talking about the wide world of lesbian cats, an exhibit that she curated at the LGBT Community Center in New York City in 2019.
So hi everyone, I'm very thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to talk about my exhibit today. So as Con already mentioned, my talk today is about the wide world of lesbian cats, which is an exhibit that I curated in 2019 with the support of a public humanities fellowship from Humanities New York. The exhibit opened at the LGBT Community Center in New York in July 2019, and then after a series of extensions, it remained on display until the building closed for the duration of the pandemic. So put briefly, the wide world of lesbian cats used images of cats as a vehicle to introduce viewers to the history of lesbian feminism from the 1970s to the present. And it moved both roughly chronologically and also roughly by genre. So it began with periodicals in the 1970s, then moved to comics in the 1980s, zines in the 1990s, and finally the last section followed the digital recirculation of lesbian cats on social media. So when I started working on the exhibit, my primary goal was to curate an exhibit that introduced the history of lesbian feminism in a fun and engaging way. And I decided to use cats as a hook initially for two reasons. First, I'm a lesbian and I love cats. And second, I thought it would be funny. But as I was curating the exhibit, I began to understand cats as taking on a specific and durable significance in lesbian feminist history. So in my time today, I'm going to begin by introducing some of the scholarship that my exhibit was in dialogue with, and then I'll return in closing to this question of what cats do for lesbian feminism. So my exhibit begins with lesbian feminist print media in the 1970s. In conceiving the exhibit, I was especially inspired by Agatha Bynes' book, Liberation in Print, which analyzes the role of grassroots feminist periodicals in shaping a collective feminist movement. So her project tracks the repetition of different both visual and also rhetorical tropes that she argues help solidify a collective identity for women in the movement. So to give you a sense of her project, I'll tell you a little bit about her last chapter, which is interested in the circulation of 19th century abolitionist and women's rights activist Sojourner Truth within feminist periodicals in the 1970s. So it's my contention that cats also function as a visual trope within feminist media in the 1970s. And I'll give you a very literal example of this. So in the mid-1970s, there was a lesbian feminist periodical called Albatross, which was founded by a group of lesbians in East Orange, New Jersey. One of the founders was Virginia E. Bass, and one of the things that she would contribute to the periodical is these little illustrations of cats that would just appear randomly in the margins of the magazine. So a few years after Albatross, there was another small group of lesbians that formed a different periodical in Ann Arbor, Michigan called Leaping Lesbian. And in one of their early issues in March 1977, one of the members of the collective traced one of the cats that originally appeared in Albatross and reproduced it without citing the source in Leaping Lesbian. So Leaping Lesbian immediately realized their mistake, and one of the members of the collective, Nancy Silverrod, sent a letter to Albatross apologizing. And also another member of the collective sent the illustration that I have on the slide, which dramatizes the theft of this graphic as the actual theft of cats out of the office of Albatross. So both the illustration and also the apology appeared in Albatross, and then also Leaping Lesbian printed their own retraction as well. So this is, again, a very literal example of the broader argument that Bynes is getting at, that these periodicals, even though they're founded by different groups of lesbians across the country, were in dialogue with one another, and also that there's this set of visual and rhetorical tropes that you can track across different periodicals. So similarly, my exhibit is in dialogue with Margaret Galvin's work, and especially her article from a 2018 issue of American Literature on Alison Bechdel. So Galvin argues that Bechdel is treated as kind of this singular figure in both lesbian and queer history, and this is especially after the publication of her widely famous graphic novel Fun Home. But the problem with treating Bechdel as a singular figure is that it elides the ways that she's participating in this broader network of lesbian feminist comics who are publishing in grassroots periodicals in the 70s and 80s. So one of the examples that she gives of this is Literary Dykes to Watch Out For, which is a 1984 comic that was an earlier iteration of the much more famous Dykes to Watch Out For. And I'll just briefly add to her analysis that you can spot a cat butt in the bottom of the panel. So what Galvin meticulously documents is this comic actually appeared in the September 1984 issue of Woman News, which was a New York-based periodical that Bechdel was actually on the collective that put it together. So both in Galvin's work and also my exhibit, I'm on one level kind of suggesting a chronology from periodicals in the 70s to comics in the 80s, but there was actually in practice a good deal of slippage between the two and not like a narrow chronology of one to the other. So similarly, my exhibit is also indebted to Kate McKinney's research on lesbian feminist media and technologies, who I believe is here. So Kate McKinney historicizes how lesbian feminist activists are using different media technologies from the 70s to the present, and is also refusing the idea that there's a singular shift from print to digital media. So for example, in the conclusion of their book, they're looking at the entangled print and digital media histories by looking at what they refer to as a revival of lesbian feminism on the internet in the mid-2000s, as exemplified, for example, by the popular Instagram herstory. So my exhibit's making a similar shift in closing. It's looking at the digital recirculation of lesbian feminism and the continued role of cats in this genealogy of lesbian feminist history by looking also at the Instagram herstory and also, for example, an Instagram meme account called Xeno Warrior Princess. So that then leads me to where I'm going to conclude, which is speculating in closing how cats are discursively functioning in lesbian feminist history. So in my search for cats, I began to notice patterns as I was looking at more and more cats. And specifically, cats tended to function as part of what I would argue is a signature lesbian feminist move, which is rather than attempting to kind of counter the pejorative assumptions about lesbians that circulate in dominant culture, lesbian feminism from the 1970s to the present tended to instead embrace the pejorative. So to celebrate lesbians, as to borrow from Robin Morgan's provocative essay, bitchy, catty, dykey, Solonesque, frustrated, crazy, nutty, ridiculous, bitter, embarrassing, man-hating, stupid, petty, and liberating, the women that men have warned us about. So cats, I'm arguing, tend to function in lesbian feminist media as part of this reclamation of the pejorative. So a few examples of this: cats, for example, frequently function as the kind of familiars to witches. They're also more generally the antisocial companions of lesbians. So two examples of this: Diana Damasa's zine series Hothead Paisan, where it features her cat Chicken with Hothead, a homicidal lesbian terrorist. Or this illustration in Lesbian Tide, which is reprinted a few times throughout the run of the magazine, with two lesbians walking around with their cats who are very upset that there's all these heterosexuals on the street with them. And then also another example, this kind of reclamation of the pejorative. Cats also frequently function as a stand-in for other meanings of pussy. So in the following these cats to the Lesbian Feminist Archive, The Wide World of Lesbian Cats tracks how lesbians repurposed existing ideas about cats as either feminized, antisocial, or queer towards a feminist end. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I apologize for any technical delays on my end. It's a whole mess here, as any scholarship should be. Up next, we have Rachel Levine, who is the Arts and Science Postdoctoral Fellow in the Department of Computer Science. Her research background is in social anthropology. Her postdoc project studies both the design and use of robotics or artificial agents, pets. Her particular interest is in how animals' intelligence is imagined, engineered, and consumed, and in a very practical way, what all of this would mean for the future of animal extracted labor and laboring animals. I pass it to Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Yes, good synopsis. So I'd like to just start by giving a little bit of a background on what brought me to this research project. I am still amazed that I have a postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Computer Science, as I can't even help my dad fix his computer. So my questions really are grounded in ethnographic research, long-term field research, of course, social history, historiography, and the social sciences more broadly, and of course, social constructivism. So some of the core concerns and themes within social anthropology. So broadly, in terms of, I guess, areas as they'd be understood outside of niche disciplines, my research connects studies in artificial intelligence and studies in human-animal relationships. And a key concern I have in this research is sort of questioning the basis of what intelligence means insofar as it's manufactured artificially, and how animal intelligence, which has historically not, granted an affordance to legal standing or personhood or agency, is being folded in to new ideas about what intelligence is, or perhaps into old ideas of what intelligence is, being manufactured into the bodies of animals. So the project, as I hope it pans out, but we live in a changing world, and transnational research is complicated anyways. But the project, as I plan it, focuses on a robotic baby seal, which some of you have maybe be familiar with, because the image of this seal circulates a lot when there's little news blippets and snippets about animals and AI. His name is Pero, P-A-R-O, and he is the Guinness World Record. I say he. I don't think the seal sex or gendered. Actually, I should consider that again. But Pero is the Guinness World Records title holder of world's most therapeutic robot, which, on its own, I think, clarifies kind of where's the competition, right? So we're seeing like a real niche developing around the world's most as it pertains to intelligence, as it pertains to animals, and now as it pertains, of course, to robotics. So the plan is to study the design and engineering of Pero, who's now entering their 9th generation model at the National Institute of Industrial Science and Technology in Tokyo, and then better understand sort of how Pero is adopted into programming in residential and community services, and also in private homes. So of course, cost is a significant barrier when it comes to accessing, I guess, artificially intelligent pets versus a simpler sort of robotic. So this is another question that's sort of emerging, is it's how has sort of I suppose the democratization of pet ownership now in North America is almost sort of democratic entitlement. People just, it's an unregulated market. Many people own pets with very little consideration. So I think this research also kind of complicates what it means to own a pet, to live with a pet, to love a pet, to take on a pet as a project that is perhaps more about, that has to weigh, right, the sort of intersubjective concerns about those pets' interests and one's own. So we know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a surge in research in AI, and AI was really central to clinical treatments, public safety opportunities, laboratory automation, basically areas of urgent care where interhuman encounter was restricted. And robotic pets also surged in popularity at the height of the pandemic, which sort of began to engender a new wave of mixed message research in the medical arts and social sciences, studying how pandemic conditions specifically, gave cause or gave rise to these relationships. And basically the work that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic confirmed earlier findings that robotic pets decrease loneliness and depression within an older user demographic, often in care homes. Most of the research on companion robot pets has looked at that demographic. My questions pertain to relationships with robot pets in and beyond that demographic, certainly, but really at the core of my research is a concern about what robot pets mean for animals, non-robotic animals, and what, the expectations that are automated into robot pets perhaps mean for the future of our relationship, not just with our pets, but with laboring animals more broadly. So that comes from the premise that the love pets give us is a form of labor, right? So that sort of feminist care tradition. This research I find particularly important as a social scientist, because social scientists have been sort of very circumspect in their sensibilities towards AI, usually aligning their inquiries with public suspicion about bias, the disintegration of privacy, weakened care networks, and so on. This is, a broad perspective shared among social scientists. There's sort of an anthropocentric bias, presuming that AI will replace, the human, right? And that is its greatest threat. So another issue we have then is that social science findings are sometimes integrated into organizational settings and design. So, the design of these robotic pets is and will be hopefully more responsive to research in this critical research in the social sciences. AI is an area experiencing exponential growth. We all know this. It's predicted to garner $734 billion in investments within market investments in the next 4 years. That's US dollars, with a worldwide economic output of $13 trillion projected by 2030. So this is a key site of advances in human health. And, my concern is looking at the ways in which the research that's been done so far and the questions that have been asked so far and the assumptions perhaps embedded in design so far may lead many ways in which non-human laborers, the interest of animals' interests in robotic animal intelligence as it sort of bears on what their futures will look like vis-a-vis labor and exploitation. So yes, my question really is, what does the design and use of intimate robotic labor mean for the future of animal labor and laboring animals? So this also means considering, taking seriously forms of animal intelligence, such as, touch-driven response, affection, I guess what maybe people would cite as intuition, as a basis of intelligence that may potentially expand legal categories of personhood that may potentially change laws around animal, but also human exploitation. And I think that sums that up. I'm not sure if I've gone over my time or stayed within my time, but I think that I can pause there for now and happy to chat more.
Great, yeah. Lots of things to chat about in the discussion time. So lastly, I want to introduce Natalie Ngai, who is a PhD candidate in communications and media at the University of Michigan. Her research focuses on cuteness and kawaii in the media. Natalie is thinking about how girly cuteness in the media embodies rebellious meaning for individuals, especially women. Her original research is published in journals like Feminist Media Studies, Celebrity Studies, and Media, Culture, and Society. Natalie has received multiple national and international research awards from organizations like Society for Cinema and Media Studies and the British Association of Film, Television, and Screen Studies, and the Association of Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. So I will pass it to Natalie.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me to do this self-promotion for a bit. Can you see the PowerPoint? Right, okay, sounds good. So, and thank you for having me as a guest speaker. So I'm so honored to speak about my research and my cat, of course. And cuteness is often seen as kind of like self-indulgent, childish, or sometimes only popular in East Asia. And if performed by women, even anti-feminist, as some feminist critics said. My work shows that cuteness in the media embodies rebellious meanings, especially to girls and women. So my work actually speaks directly to Rachel, and I want to understand how women use pets to communicate with each other, like in the lesbian activism, and also how we humans work with pets, who are agents on social media like Instagram. So in media studies, there's the literature of micro-celebrity. People suggest that, okay, people present themselves as celebrity on social media for selfish gains. But my question are, do people really use their pets to compete for attention? And why presenting their pets as celebrities would be pleasurable for everyday social media user? So I work with my cat research assistant, also my pet Bean, to conduct, this ethnographic studies. Let me briefly introduce a few interactions we have on Instagram here. I post pictures of Bean and make friends with other cat Instagram accounts. Like others, I use Bean's voice and the very cute language there to say things like here. It is his birthday. I said, I'm officially 6 today. It's my birthday party, but I will not just take, but also give. So on his birthday, I found that people there are really sweet. Another black cat friend sent us a hand-drawn birthday card, who I only met online. I found that free giveaways and promoting others are very common on cat Instagram. Another time, I post a picture of Bean wearing this very cute bow tie and said, would you like to go on a date with me? Say yes, and I will be yours. Other cat accounts said, okay, glad to be your wingman if you ever need one. And then, some people would speak on behalf of their cat and said, Lunar said yes, things like that. Another time I post, of course, on behalf of Bean and said the vet visit was very terrifying. I was pretty calm most of the time, but car rides, no way. And they poked me twice, 2 shots, I'm done for today. So people, and of course their cats, try to calm us down when we're so nervous about the vet visits. And then they would say things like, oh, you're a brave one, feel better. And someone said, oh, my heart just aches for your sad, frightened little face. I feel for you on the car ride too. I always feel better when my mommy sings to me. Hope you're feeling better by now. So here are some quotes. I also conduct, in-depth interviews to supplement my ethnographic work. And here are some quotes from my interviewees who also run Instagram for fun. So for them, cat Instagram was a safe space for women to indulge in cuteness, like Chris here said. I think like one of my family members, my brother said something that's mean, like, I don't want to see your cat on your Snapchat. I can speak to people who are empathetic and understand what I'm going through, and they can emotionally support me instead of trying to tell me that I'm wrong for spending money to save my cats. And everyday users, instead of promoting themselves for commercial gains, they are well aware that they're not commercializing their pets for many reasons. For example, Mindy here said, it's just so much work. You have to make several posts, you have to make sponsor videos, you have to use their products and share photos of them. They usually have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers. It's so much interaction. And even though I'll be honored if she would be a cat influencer, I just don't have the time to do that. I do not want to take away the fun parts of the experience. Also, adding cute is not just, a lot of people would say calculating self-presentation. Adding cute for many of us, I actually emphasize the good side of us. Like Abby here said, an interesting aspect of pet Instagram is being your pet's voice. I do think like being your pet's voice kind of bring out a good side of people, because you always want to be, like being as nice as your pet. So the main arguments of my research are, first of all, many everyday social media users, they promote their cute pets and themselves for fun without really striving for money or their own status. And secondly, the cat Instagram reclaims pleasure of mothering for women. So mothering is not just for the patriarchal or heterosexual regime. And here I understand the cute cat Instagram as an assemblage of cute cat human cyborg. They both anthropomorphize the pet and animalize the human at the same time. It is not just we human use the pet to talk about ourselves. It demands the person to act cute toward others like the cute cat. So here are the three main arguments of my research. And if you want to know more, I can talk more about it. And also I published this project in Celebrity Studies. You can check that out if you want. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm just going to spotlight everyone and open the floor up for questions, comments, and interactions between our three speakers in general. Okay. Igor?
Yep. Hello. Thanks for interesting presentations. And I just wanted to share some observations, because I spent last year in Japan and I interacted a lot about Japanese robots and stuff. And they have Lovot robot recently, one of the most new and cool companion robot they devise. And I specifically went to their museum and asked how does it interact with animals. And they said no, they didn't do any planning for that. It only recognized humans and other robots, and all the other animals for it is just moving inanimate objects. And I was a bit sad to hear, but just wanted to share that.
I'll add something. I think, yeah, this speaks very directly to something that I'm getting at, which is, beyond human intelligence. So the recognition too, engineer recognition of other forms of, let's say, responsibility or expression. I think that's extremely interesting. And Igor, that's something I hadn't even considered. So I'm really glad you shared that. Thank you.
Clarice?
Hi. This might be kind of like a too broad of a question, not too sure. Just a little bit about myself. I'm only in my second year of undergraduate, so I'm just really getting into, post-secondary school and things like that. But how did you find, or any of y'all find, like your niche in academia, I guess?
I think Rachel should go first.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, like, because this is the project that I talked about today is both like related to my research, but also distinct from my research. So I think I should talk a little bit about my research and then explain like how it relates to my research. So my research is on the history of lesbian feminism, and there's like a range of like kind of like intellectual and political and personal reasons that drew me to that. And then public humanities work in general is rather than like geared towards a academic audience, is geared towards a general audience. So it's about like trying to like create like a particular way to like to attract an audience that's beyond the kind of narrow audience that you'd be engaging for academic research. So like in this case, it's like people like cats, so I will make it a project about cats, but also will like secretly tell them about the history of lesbian feminism, which is like a less like sexy and interesting thing than here's my cat show.
Yeah, for me, thank you so much for this question. It is very brave of you to come actually as an undergrad. And for me, I worked on cues in the media. So when I first start my undergrad in the United States, I came from Hong Kong, and then I realized a lot of like feminist critique, they kind of oversimplify cuteness. So they would say it is a very calculating thing for patriarchal or male interests. But from my experience, I think, oh, hold on, I grew up watching, Japanese anime. The girls are really cute, but they're not just pretty. And they're not, the sexual fetish that people thought they are. They're very, rebellious, powerful, strong. So I think, okay, what are we missing here? So that's why I focus on the liberating, rebellious meanings of cuteness and think about, wow, a lot of, people around me, they use cat Instagram to talk with each other, especially girls and women. So I wonder, what's going on here? And then what is so fun about it? Yeah, that's how I approach my research.
I can, speak a bit more specifically, Clarice. I think how I took your question was in terms of like the path that I had that got me to where I am. Mine has been very knotted and winding. I began my PhD studies interested in the experiences of homeless, street involved, and marginally housed adults with pets. And my question really was sort of quite a pragmatic one. Like, how do they manage their resource struggles when, something that is sort of something that is considered property, a pet's considered property. How do people who are apprehended externally as propertyless and are afforded opportunities and supports based on this assumption that they are propertyless, how do they, I suppose, square a very intimate relationship that is not for them a property relationship with sort of a public culture that understands it as superfluous. I was interested in that, and I still am, but that project grew into something more specifically interested in the category of dangerous dogs and the social construction of dangerous dogs. And so my PhD thesis is on dog bite lawsuits. Where that joins or where that connects to what I proposed for my postdoc research, I mean, there's a schism, right? This will be my first time really studying artificial intelligence sort of as a delineated field. But I mean, really my passions and research questions grew around like, what do we want from animals, right? And I think these categories that we've been talking about in terms of cute, and I know Sienna Guy, who I imagine some people you're familiar with, but I can, in the chat box, share some of her work. She talks about cute, but also zany and wacky, these sort of aesthetic categories that kind of function as, I guess, moral loopholes to not really affording consideration to the cutified and so forth. So yeah, my questions really are, I mean, when we think about good relationships with animals, what do we mean? And when we think about good relationships with animals, how much of that has to do with our relationships with other people and what that animal not necessarily represents, but how that animal sort of interpolates us, and how having, you know, some relationships with animals are marginalized, right? I mean, a biting dog or a dog wearing a muzzle, that the owner's going to move through the world in a very different way than somebody with a dog that can just meet any stranger that approaches it. So dogs also shape our personal space. So space, I mean, I feel like once you go down the winding road with animal studies, it's like, and I think, you know, Rachel, you expressed this too in terms of your different projects, and Natalie, you published widely. It's like the questions just, it's like whack-a-mole. There's just always another question. So if you're interested in animal stuff, I mean, I just encourage you to pursue, you know, critical research in animal studies wholeheartedly. And like, I just feel like these paths make themselves. Yeah, because there's big conceptual questions underlying any question we ask about animals, and those will always lead us to new questions.
Natalie, you had the hand up for a while.
Yes. So I have this question for Rachel Cortman. So I wonder, because in my research, I often found that, especially, you know, this cat Instagram project, I found that a lot of girls and women, they like to masquerade as cat. Like, you know, a lot of like Japanese girl in kawaii culture, they will wear, you know, fake cat, you know, ears and tails, not just for self, you know, presentation, I would argue, but to kind of stress the shared vulnerabilities with the cat. So I wonder, in the archival materials that you see, are the women there cute like the cat? Would they, you know, masquerade or act like a cat or some sort? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I've seen like some like kind of blurring the boundaries of like if it's human or if it's a cat. Like I'm thinking of, there's a cartoon of okay, so first of all, there's the first lesbian journal is called The Ladder, and it was created by an organization called the Daughters of Politis. And in the 1960s, they had a cat that was actually like on their like committee of like creating the periodical, and they have some illustrations of that, and it's kind of like sort of an animal, sort of a cat in terms of how it's depicted. And then there's also, because like my research initially was like, of course, on like how cats circulate in lesbian feminist media, but then I was also starting to think about like actually existing cats. And so like in the show, there was a cat show in Atlanta that the Atlanta Lesbian Feminist Alliance put on, and then there's like images of the cats with the humans. So there's both like actual cats and then also the discursive representations of cats. But I can't really think of anybody like dressing as cats in the archival material that I was looking at. So like in some ways I could see resonances, but it also feels like like there's something like distinct that's happening there with like dressing as cats.
Julia?
Thank you all for your presentations. They were so interesting and amazing. My question is also for Rachel Corbin. So I love like thinking about lesbian history as like co-produced or co-constructed with cats, but also can be told through cats. And I'm wondering, in your archival work, did any other animals surface? And if so, how? Like, for example, dogs, were they visible at all, or was it all cats?
There were definitely a lot of dogs. I think like what became the distinction for me is, again, that like cats are like functioning in this very particular way and like kind of like associated with deviance or like overly feminized or like associated with witches. And then also like one of the, because this gets at kind of like the broader challenge that I faced in doing the exhibit is that I got a lot of questions about like if lesbians are more likely to have cats. And the short answer is like, maybe a little bit, but not really. A lot of people have cats. And also similarly, like a lot of people have dogs. And there are like circulating associations of like dog lesbians and cat lesbians. But I don't have like convincing evidence that there are like actually more cats that lesbians have or actually more dogs that lesbians have. And in general, dogs circulate too in media in general. So there's something very particular about the circulation of cats, but there's also a bunch of other animals and like farm animals too come up in especially like a lot of the Southern or country lesbian periodicals as well.
And then Kate?
Hi, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That was wonderful. This has been such a delight. Thank you all. I have a question that I think could be for anyone or everyone. And it's about bringing us back to a question that Rachel Cordman used, or a term Rachel Cordman used, which was the word durable to talk about cats across the history of lesbian feminism. And it strikes me that that's sort of a concern of all of your projects, like AI, pets, animals, and AI has like long been the sort of uber object of demonstrating what artificial intelligence might do in our lives. And the use of like cats and pets on social media, I would say, is like one of the original genres of the form. So I'm wondering about like sort of how you think in your work about tracing those durabilities across time, and what these kinds of scenes do for our histories of these political formations or mediums. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Shall I take, yeah. Animal history, I found, is a really, really fascinating, sort of rich, almost history from below, or people's history, as Eric Hobsbawm might say, in terms of how we might sort of understand a much more nuanced, scaffolded, interspeciated history of. Largely, these questions have arisen around industrialization and modernization, because that was the time in which pets sort of became, like an owned thing as opposed to dogs, and also sort of the beginning of the democratization of pets, in terms of the fact that they were owned by rich people in cities. Their ownership no longer depended on huge amounts of land, which meant their use no longer depended really on their utility, right? So this is when animals started being bred, not for their purpose, but for their cuteness, more or less. So I think, if I can sort of reformulate your question correctly in my head, it had to do with sort of, historicizing these questions. And yeah, for me, animal history, which again, much of what I found has to do with Victorian England and early industrial North America. So I would be, of course, very interested to learn more cross-culturally across the world, transnationally. But I think these alternative histories, that is a key site where contemporary animal studies kind of started to get taken seriously in the academy. And I think the question of history is so important. And I'm glad there is some work on it, but it's something that certainly should can be worked on and nuanced, and I can put some suggestions of readings in the chat box.
I can comment on, how I, historicize my project. So the pet Instagram is actually one of the 3 parts of my dissertation. Digital pets is an example of how everyday users right now, they can deploy cuteness using the digital media technology. But I also focus on, in the 1930s in Hollywood star system, the studio, they curate cute girl stars like Shirley Temple and Betty Boop. they're kind of cute and also not just appeal to children, but also adults. They're rebellious girls who would able to, save themselves and also sometimes their families in very difficult situation. And secondly, I also think about this question transnationally because in the 1990s, when kawaii culture became a very hip thing in the globalized industrial world, kawaii culture also affect the United States. So this is the thing that I also studied, Lolita girls and Hello Kitty and how they're kind of like rebellious girls in the media. This digital pets is a kind of like a case studies to think about how historically the media curate cuteness, but right now, because of the advancement of digital media and technology, how everyday media users can, kind of use the media to represent cuteness themselves. So I hope that's answer your question a little bit.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how to answer this, and I think there's kind of three historical trajectories that I'm thinking along. First is the kind of associations that cats have accrued over time, which goes back a lot farther than like the history that my exhibit is actually tracing, because my exhibit's starting in the 1970s with lesbian feminism after the emergence of the women's liberation movement. So I'm kind of interested in the collision of this like longer ways in which cats have like accrued different things over time, and then how that's used in lesbian feminism. And then the third trajectory that it's thinking along is the history of media technologies and how lesbian feminism has been using different media technologies over time since the 70s.
Does anyone have any last thoughts to add to this conversation?
I have, oh, sorry, Shan has their.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Actually, I have a general question. Let's imagine that if a pet owner actually lost their sense of touch, is there any negative impact to their regular kind of interaction between their pets and pet owners? And how could we like recover this negative impacts? Yeah, I think this is a big question.
I'd be happy to answer. Sorry, could you just rephrase that just a little bit? I feel like I missed you at some point in there.
Okay. It's just what kind of negative impacts does if like if a pet owner lost their sense of touch, how could this how will it impact their regular kind of interaction between the pet owners and pets? Yeah.
I think, oh, sorry, no, please.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think, all the senses are so sort of relevant in our interactions with our intimate familiar animals, but also, how the way in which it's important to think about how our senses are blocked when it comes to how we don't interact with other animals, like animals, used for meat and so forth. So I think, the question about how would the loss of sort of touch change the relationship? Like, I think it certainly would, but I also feel that, there's questions that could be asked, like the same question could be asked about sight, hearing. I think our relationships with animals are so multi-sensorial. And I think, I know for me, like I rub my dogs all the time. Like I love doing that, but I have one dog that doesn't much like being touched, and we have sort of our own relationship. So I think touch is touch and touch driven response are sort of hugely important in these interactions. But I think without that sense, let's assume it was somebody that had the sense and lost it. They would adjust. If there was never that sense, there was never any touch. Yeah, I do wonder if there would be ownership. Yeah.
So I can, because I'm not an expert, in, thinking about psychological impact of, pet ownership or any kind of like that, but I can speak a little bit about this because during my ethnographic research, some people told me, oh, I actually have a long distance with my cat, which means that she moved to another country, but her cat is in another country, but she still keep posting her cat's pictures on Instagram as a kind of like a memory or like a way to cohabit with the cat on social media. It's fun too. And also one of the very popular pet influencer is called Mr. Pokey. He's a hedgehog, but he actually already died many years ago. You may want to check it out, how people use social media to continue the relationship with the pets in these kind of ways. So I would say as a media studies scholar, digital media changed our relationship with pets too.
Well, great. Thank you all. Our hour is just about up. Thank you to our three wonderful speakers, Rachel C., Rachel L., and Natalie. I feel like I'm in high school again, calling you both that. And thank you for everyone who came and participated in this lightning lunch. I want to wrap up with a few announcements. Our winter series for these lightning lunch will begin again in mid-January, so please keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, you can check out other CDHI events on our event page. Coming up, we actually have an event next Monday on the 21st, organized by our very own Rachel Corbin. So if you wanted to talk a little bit about that event.
Yeah, so it's a praxis workshop, which I think, Matt, can you drop the link in the chat? But yeah, it's a media training for humanities researchers from two people in the communications office at U of T.
Great. Registration link is in the chat box. So if you're free to learn about digital or media engagement for humanities scholars, feel free to register. It's a wonderful event. We also have digital drop-ins that take place every Thursday. And you can check out a list of the topics for these drops in on our event page as well. They run, again, every Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. Anyone, because all these events are virtual, it is free and open to everyone. So please check out our event page, and thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you again in January. A big round of applause for our three wonderful speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun here.
I just want to preface, my pet dream is having a cat and a robotic dog named Chicken and Duck. So
Why not?
So, have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you.